Welcome to episode 28 of My Dog Will Eat My Face. As I look at life, I realize some things are perfect. Some things, though, are not so good, if not that catastrophic. And my life right now is juxtaposed between those occasional moments of fun or perfection or a perfect moment, and on the other side, the battle my body is going through and the consequences of that battle and what I'm suffering through as I go through it. In this podcast, I plan to share the perfect and then the bad or the catastrophic, whichever you wish to call it. First, though, this is no surprise, guys. I know my body is going downhill. I've talked about it now for some time. Doctors have told me it's going to go downhill and to expect it to get worse. And at the same time, though, I've tried to find happiness in whichever is left of my life at the same time. So, the position I'm in is totally, again, unsurprising. It's, I think, a direct consequence of my own doing. And it's not necessarily, in that sense, then a bad position. I could just be in the position to where I'm only dealing with my life going downhill and the physical side collapsing all around me. Wherein, at least here, I have an opposing side, which occasionally exists, of happiness and good or perfect moments. So, with all that said, I feel I need to share the latest incarnation of my fate. That is, the fight between the good and where my body is going. Along with the latter, there is going to be some new medical news that I will have to share, and it's, needless to say, not good news. So that will be upcoming when I discuss that opposing force. And so I begin. First, let's start with the good. I have a perfect example as recent as just last night. At the time, I was cuddled up in my bed, my laptop on my lap, of course. Where else would my laptop be? My dog snuggled right next to me with his head on my thigh and his paws kind of wrapped around me in a hug as he kind of held me. a pillow behind my head, all cozied up and warm, while it was a blistering, snowing night outside. And there within that second in time, in that moment, I did have to say to myself, wow, this is perfect. Because it was. It truly was a perfect moment for me. And those happen so rarely, and you've got to recognize it when they happen, I think. And just as I sat there snuggled up with my puppy, watching some stupid movie, all warm and cozied up in the bed, while it snowed blistering outside, like high winds and snow coming down and ice. Inside were perfectly warm. It just was a perfect moment that happened last night. So, I'm living the rest of my life the best life I possibly can. I find happiness still to keep me up and keep me going. And I find purpose with caring for my dog. To me, he's an innocent soul that's helpless, and without my care, he'd die. All these are not the traits of a man who knows he's dying. But it's such a slow, agonizing process. I have to keep the happiness going. And speaking of the agonizing process, unfortunately, that will lead me to the latest development in my physical well-being. And that's very much not good. But before I go there, I just want to say how thankful I am for making plans to be happy and doing what I can to force happiness into my life as much as I can. Force sounds harsh, but it is the word. I do try to find things that will make me happy, insert them into my life, and live them. And a lot of times that takes a lot of brute force, because the natural state of things, most of us would agree, is pretty lousy. That was another thing, honestly, I noticed last night. Everything I had in that moment, everything that I was so happy for and thankful for, were because of me and my own decisions. I was safe and sound in my home that I pay for. I was in the bed I bought. I was with the puppy I adopted, with the laptop I bought, and watching some stupid movie that I randomly chose. So, truly, everything in this perfect moment was there because I made it happen. And I'm not saying that as a gesture of hubris, not by any means. I'm humbled by it, if anything, because when I realized that in the moment, I'm so grateful for the fact that I did push for those difficult things to get, as some of these things were very difficult to get. They sound simple, but not always. And certainly not for me. So it led me to a point of being thankful. And so it really was an absolutely perfect moment. And I would wish that on anyone to have a moment like that in their life. And frankly, I look forward to the next time I do have a perfect moment. But I digressed. I did mention the agonizing process of my demise. And that does indeed lead me to the next topic, which is my physical well-being, where it's going, and what's the news with that. And unfortunately, it's not good. Now, there may be some listeners that remember when I was sick a couple of weeks back, and I think I posted sort of a sick note for myself on my podcast stream rather than a full podcast because I was feeling so poorly and my throat was to blame. Well, that happened. Anyway, whether you remember it or not, I did get sick with some sort of unknown infection, we thought at the time, and hit it with antibiotics, and it did get better over time. It just took a little while. And for a number of days, it's been 100% better. I had never felt it at all during those few days. Well, like 4 days or so. Well, unfortunately for me, it came back just recently. I'd say probably a couple days ago, I started to feel a sore throat again, and in the exact same spot where I had felt it prior. Literally within the exact same place in my throat. And it was so bad that I could feel it like it was an abscess or something, like a lump that was growing there, to where it was just so painful to swallow or talk. And it felt like it was getting worse by the hour. I mean, I really did feel that it seemed like it was suddenly getting worse from 1 hour to the next. So, needless to say, I've asked for medical attention again from my hospice team. And the nurse visited, examined it, and of course I talked to the doctor about it. And I was really shocked, though, when the doctor called me back about it. Usually if there's any change or new prescription, it's just the nurse handles it. It's usually not the doctor. But the doctor herself called me off her cell. So I'll save that number in my phone for later. Blah. Anyway, it called me directly and said that they think that antibiotics are not the way to go, and I thought that they were crazy. I was like, "What are you talking about?" Long story short, what they think this is an opportunistic infection that is attacking my esophagus deep inside. And it's actually a form of fungus inside the esophagus. It's treatable, that's the good news, but it takes a long time. It takes a good half month of medications. The key, though, to this is this particular illness only happens to people whose body's immune system are compromised, which means I'm definitely one of them. So, I'm likely more susceptible to minor viruses or head colds or minor infections. And something as basic as a sinus infection could kill me. You just don't know. I mean, or a head cold could turn into pneumonia, full-blown bilateral pneumonia. I have to be put on a ventilator. It could get bad if I get sick, even with a simple thing that in a normal person would not take much to kill and take care of. And my own experience is a good example of that. This is a disease a bug that healthy people just don't get, period. End of conversation. They don't get it. And in my case, I'm getting it over and over because we didn't treat it right. And I asked, well, then why didn't I feel better with the antibiotics? And my doctor said that with antibiotics, there's a natural, I don't know if it's natural, but there is an anti-inflammatory component to it, to antibiotics overall, and that made you feel better, but it didn't kill it. So I thought that was interesting. I never knew that about antibiotics, that they're also anti-inflammatory in their nature, but now I know. I wish I could have a little rainbow pop up somehow on everyone's screen. Anyway, so yeah, I basically am now susceptible to these what did I call them? Opportunistic infections. This is something that people with AIDS deal with. This is something that people with lupus deal with. This is something that a lot of people with a lot of other conditions, to where their body can't fight for itself, simply can't deal with. And basically my body is now so beaten down from everything, from the heart failure, that it's causing this paradigm to occur and allowing my body to get infected by these things that are not normal, that shouldn't be happening in a healthy, normal person. Now, I never would have said I was healthy and normal, But I always said, well, at least my immune system's fine. I mean, my parts are broken, my carburetor's missing, but my engine works, you know. But now I can't even say that. You know, that's the sad part. I can't even say that. So this is a new reality, a new normal that I'm going to have to deal with, and will probably have to in perpetuity. So that happened, and that news came out, and you could probably hear it in my throat, the raspiness. No, I was not at a hockey game last night, or a concert, or in British Parliament. I wasn't doing any of those. So it's just the infection in my esophagus causing my throat to hurt and this raspiness in my voice, which I'm definitely not faking. So it's just a new thing that I am being treated for. But again, it takes half a month, and I'm on day 2 of treatment. So it's not shocking that I sound like crap right now. My fear is that this is undoubtedly foreshadowing the future. And there's going to be more of my body just breaking down. In this case, not defending itself is pretty serious. But I'm going to expect, personally, other things to also fail just from the stress. The physical stress of me trying to stay alive. And that sucks. In fact, that's what I said to my doctor, because I said basically the exact same thing to her. So what you guys are hearing are basically my conversation with my doctor. I said, for the exact same reasons that I've shared with you here, that this sucks. And she said, I agree, that's a good word for it. It sucks. And speaking of good phrases for complex issues, I wasn't able to stop myself from being reminded of the story of Bastogne, the Battle of Bastogne. You know, the Battle of the Bulge, and the evening hours, I guess, of World War II. You see, the Germans had completely surrounded the American 101st Airborne and left them in a position to where they were completely surrounded and were helpless and faced certain defeat if the multiple panzer divisions came in and decided to execute them and to fight them. So the German general in charge sent to the Americans a demand to surrender. And the leader of the 101st Airborne, whose name I wish I knew, I gotta look it up, but it escapes me at this point. Anyway, he replied to the Germans, and his reply was one word: nuts. And what's funny is it took the German command quite some time, days, I believe it is, to try to decipher and figure out what that meant. Because, they had their translators there, but they would, translate it like a wiki translator. And so he just said nuts, like pine nuts and walnuts. What the heck is he talking about? That can't be right. What does nuts mean? So they were struggling for forever. The Germans were to figure out that nuts didn't really mean nothing, but it certainly was not a surrender. And that bought them some time, and that was crucial for when Patton's Third Army rolled in and liberated the 101st from besiegement there in Bastogne. So, such simple eloquence of one words in dire situations can be used effectively to save lives and to save yourself. So that's why in this case, I said to my doctor, well, this sucks. And she agreed. So we'll see if we have similar luck to the 101st or not after this. But only time will tell. Anyway, that is the physical update as to what's going on opposing the seeking for pleasure and fun and a good life in the other side, in the same life. There is an old Roman proverb: a brave man may fail, but he may not yield. Perhaps that is something I've taken to heart. I know I have fallen and will continue to do so, but I may not yield. Ergo, I found perfection in life, in moments. And I'm sure I will again, even as I decay. This is my last major decision to make in life. How will I spend my last years, or months, or days? Well, I may and will continue to try and fail or fall. But I may not ever yield. I may not just stop trying. When I was a kid, I learned something of this. See, I was in a school organized race. You know, when I think those schools do like those presidential tests and race where they get all the kids to live a life like Lord of the Flies for like a week and judge them and ridicule them based on their performance. Well, I participated in an organized race during these events. A leg race, I should say. And surprisingly, I was winning. And everyone was cheering me on from the side. All the class, everyone, people I didn't know were cheering me on. It was kind of funny. It felt amazing that people were actually cheering me on just because I was winning a race. But then suddenly, something terrible happened. And I lost feeling in my legs. And I just completely collapsed to the ground, to the grass. And I was on the last leg of the race, just heading to the finish line. So I got up and fell again as my competitors who were behind me flew right past me, making it so I would be last now in this race as opposed to first. But I kept getting up and moving a little bit and falling and getting up a little bit and falling repeatedly, largely unable to feel my legs. I eventually crawled across the finish line. The school gave first place to the kid who won it, naturally. And behind the scenes, the teachers and the PE teacher, who was this rough guff kind of Marine guy, gave me a second first place medal because of my perseverance of getting up every time I fell and trying my hardest to finish the race. And that was a major lesson that I have learned in my life. In many ways, I feel like that kid again. And the meaning of that old Roman proverb strikes me with iron. I can fail but I cannot yield. Like I did that day when I was running that race. Or like, well, any other day. As I fight for my life and as things get worse. And my body crumbles around me. So, even with the bad news and terrible throat, for which I also apologize to my listeners having to listen to that throat. Sure, that's got to be really annoying. I'm sorry, there's nothing I can do. I still had a perfect moment last night. I'm certain I'll recall that proverb more than I ever have before. But alas, not yielding did pay off. And it did get me a fantastic, memorable moment last night. And hopefully, there will be more to come because, again, a brave man can fail, but he can not yield. And with that, I wish to wrap up this week's podcast. I'm so sorry that my voice again sounds terrible. Sorry too that I'm sick and I don't have much more content this week. But I did want to share these things with my listeners, and I think they're important. So thank you to my listeners for tuning in. Be sure to select follow and notify when you're viewing the podcast. Remember to click notification. You have to click that so you know when there's a future podcast. And if you really want to support the podcast and be really cool, you can go to patreon.com/mydogwilleatmyface. The URL will be in the description, of course, as always. But most of all, of course, I prefer the listeners and the people that take the time out of their day to hear my experience and my thoughts and where I'm at in my life. I appreciate it. It helps tremendously. So, thank you. And with that, I will hopefully speak to you next week some more. And for now, I'm going to say auf Wiedersehen.